Welcome to Constructed Futures. I'm Hugh Seaton. Today we're doing a special episode on punching above your weight. So in today's construction industry, staying competitive means doing more with less. And often you're bidding against larger companies that have more staff, budget, or sometimes just a better website. There are only 400 ENR top contractors, but there are tens of thousands of contractors all competing for some of the same jobs. So today we're going to hear from three great leaders who help companies to level up different aspects of their business. We've got Project Mark, Join, and Document Crunch to talk about how what they do helps with leveling up your construction company. So gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about what you do. Tom, let's start with you.
How's it going, Hugh? Delighted to be here.
Good, welcome.
So yeah, Project Mark allows companies to smartly manage their marketing content online, streamline their bid proposal development processes, and increase their visibility through a project-driven ecosystem.
Fantastic. And Jeff, what do you guys do?
So here at Join, all those things that go on in pre-construction before you get into the ground, all those decisions that have to be made, all of those budgets, et cetera, that have to be analyzed and done. Well, we help make those decisions. We're a first of its kind pre-construction platform that allows, teams to collaborate, visualize, and really decide on what they're going to put in the ground in the long term and set teams up for success. So that's what we do here at Join.
Awesome. Last but not least, Josh, talk to us about what Document Crunch does.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Hugh. So when you talked about the tens of thousands of contractors, I just can't help but think of the pain that so many of these companies have in and around understanding what's in their contract. We know that construction's a dynamic industry. Stuff happens every day. And the consequences of that stuff is often tied up or governed in the terms that contractors are either bidding or agreeing to or otherwise managing at the project level. And there's a real disconnect, at least that we've seen within the industry, around actually understanding what those terms mean and making good decisions based upon that understanding. So Document Crunch is solving for that dilemma every day using technology to help kind of demystify these onerous or hard to understand contract terms.
Awesome. So what we've got is in Tom's case, you're looking at how to present your company in the best light, whether it's generally or for a bid. Jeff's company, Join, you're talking about how to set things up for success in the beginning. And in Josh's case for Document Crunch, it's how to, in the beginning and through the project, really make sure you understand what's in your contract and what you're kind of on the hook for. So what we're talking about today and the kind of main theme is, great, how does that help smaller companies compete against some of the larger folks? Let's get into some actual details. Tom, I want to start with you again. Talk about how like a mid-tier company might look like they could be, a top tier, in our top 50.
Yeah, so oftentimes these mid-tier companies have one BD person or very limited marketing resources. In some cases, they have no marketing or BD, and everybody is a doer seller. With our infrastructure, it allows companies to easily manage their content online and then streamline the bid proposal processes. So if you think about after a coffee or a game of golf, the next question is, can you send me a bit about your company that you have expertise in this certain sector? So what we allow folks to do is really put together high quality collateral that looks like a big marketing team has put it together, but it's through this really slick infrastructure. Quality and substance is just such a huge part of why companies win work. There's often the estimate portion, and then the rest of it is on the team and company experience. So we allow mid-market companies really streamline their processes, allowing them to win more work.
So Tom, let's dig in a little deeper. Talk to me about what it's actually like for let's say it's a mid-tier contractor. How are you helping them to look like they're, an ENR top 50? What tools are you giving them to make that easier?
Yeah, so it's all centered around a single source of truth, i.e. their project and team experience. When you give an infrastructure to manage that really, really easily, you can do so much more with it. So one of our tools is a website plugin. It plugs into somebody's website to keep their project experience up to date. If you think about how many thousands of contractors lack in the quality of their website, what's the first thing that people go for is their project experience. So one of our tools allows companies to manage their experience from project mark and service that on their website. Secondly, with all your content, your team and project history in the one place, you can streamline that bid proposal workflow. So the package that you essentially put together to show why you're qualified, you do that in a really easy manner through either templates, or we're bringing in a new customization tool to open more doors so companies can put their own branded templates on it. We also have another tool called a microsite. It's a digital version of a bid workflow that allows you to track analytics and engagement on what clients and things like that are reviewing. And then we have the network portion. So the network portion is your content in this ecosystem that is driven by project experience. So if you think about how we source in construction, it's through experience. If I'm looking for a healthcare architect in San Francisco, I want to find what work that they've done, not necessarily who's paid the most on premium listings. So we give mid-tier companies the ability to put their projects out there for folks like Future Talent and other trade partners to find them in this new tangible way.
Love that. Love that. So assuming everything went brilliantly with Project Mark, that you're now faced with how do we set ourselves up for success, which is where Join comes in. So Jeff, I'm going to ask you the same question. Let's dig in a little bit on tactically, what does that mean? So better communications, better visualization. What is it, paint a picture for us. What does that actually look like?
Well, we're going to have a little fun with it, Hugh. And I love it that, what Tom's doing and what Project Mark's doing, what I think we're all doing is, we're giving a set of tools so that we don't have to grow a number of back office people. We can really grow where we need in the field and in the execution of jobs. And, everybody knows, especially Tom, as you go through this process, everybody's got a champagne budget, right? Or a champagne dream, but a beer budget. And we at Join really connect that and make it possible, because we show you where you can cut costs or come up with new ideas, where things are important. So what is it that's important about that job? What do you really value? If you're building a healthcare facility, they become more complicated over the years, where, it's an industrial facility in the back, but it's a hotel in the front. And we found a lot of times that, hey, listen, you can touch anything you want in the industrial side if it produces and performs the way we want, but don't touch the feel, right? Because this is such an aesthetic part of the healing and health. Or, think about if you're building a community center, you have a particular goal, there's particular parts. In the old days, if you had a problem and you had, let's say, an atrium and you were over budget, what'd you do? You cut the atrium out. We just made this building that looks horrible, that has no feel anymore, and nobody loves it. And at Join, we really know in this new world of collaborative project delivery, there has to be communication back and forth. There is give and take. There's always going to be give and take, but now we have a visibility. Think about how many designers in the process have felt like their ideas have been engineered out of the project. When ultimately it was, part of, hey, listen, we've got to cut costs in certain places. And, but it was a misunderstanding that was a value to the owner. So take something as simple as a concrete, right? If it's important for the owner to stay as green as they can, and they've picked a particular concrete mix for the project, and then the contractors get on the job and they cut that out and go back to an older concrete pour, sure, they shaved a few dollars, but they've really ruined again the experience. So here at Join, it's all about connecting that. And one of the things we think, especially for those, mid-tier contractors that are competing against large organizations that have all the time in the world to work on visualization and BI tools and all of that, you don't have that kind of time, but you don't need it. With a platform like ours, you can really level up, focus in, and get things done. Plus, in those organizations, all those people in the back working on the BI, they're not connected to the project. They're just connected to the data. Yeah. So, that's where I think we bring a different feel and experience for the overall contractor, and kind of pick up where Tom and team have really showed how you can win more work. It's, you've got to plan that and price that now. And that's what we're here to do.
So this theme of connecting, key people to the kind of the ground truth is a nice way to kind of ease into document crunch, right? I mean, one of the key insights, I think, Josh, that you talked about that led to the company was PMs didn't always have a kind of a real understanding of the contract, or if they did, they didn't have a running understanding. They would often come to you and other legal resources. And the idea is to kind of close that gap between people that need to know things and what they need to know. Want to talk a little bit more about what that means kind of concretely?
Absolutely. And I think, though, it really still starts in what I heard Jeff say before about the back office. So when you're talking about punching above your weight and these tens of thousands of contractors out there, it's been my experience, having been in this industry for a long time, that many of those contractors don't necessarily have subject matter expertise in the back office to truly understand the types of projects that they're bidding on and ultimately negotiating from a risk management standpoint. So it goes back to that old adage of, I wish I knew now, or I wish I knew then what I know now. And so you don't want to be that adage when it comes to a construction contract dispute or liability resulting from a project or the execution around a project. So the first thing that I think that, the first problem that I think we're really solving for, especially when you think about this group of contractors that we're focused on, is, you may not have the most sophisticated subject matter expertise sitting there in the back office working with the bid proposers, or, that VP of ops, to use Tom's terms, those seller doers. That VP of ops may not necessarily be an expert on contracts as he or she is negotiating, a new contract. So understanding what good looks like, what normal looks like, what fair looks like, and ultimately gaining some transparency in that process. I'm not sure that would change the way that these contractors necessarily are negotiating every job, but it very well may change how they price or think about the execution strategy or schedule for that job. So that's the first thing that we're solving for, right? And Hugh, I think you actually coined this phrase a long time ago, but this demystifying the contract for those folks in the back office of those mid-sized contractors or smaller contractors is really important. But then you asked about the transfer to the field, and that's equally as important. So the field doesn't necessarily need to know all the liability or risks in a contract, but the field, and going back to this whole idea that construction is a dynamic commercial transaction, right? Things happen every day. The field needs to understand what to do if it rains and there's a delay on the project, or somebody shows up late, or there's a discrepancy in the contract docs, or one of the contractors had a bust in their pricing, kind of going to Jeff's views of the world. There are external things that happen every single day, which may very well change that price and that schedule. And someone has to bear the risk of that. And these project teams, again, I believe, tend to struggle understanding and being able to leverage effective outcomes at the project level, because they're not proactively understanding and accountable to the terms of the contract. They view the contract as this kind of enigmatic puzzle that they don't really want to get too engaged in. And they kind of, contractors and project managers in particular tend to have this mentality, this rose-colored glasses of, look, we'll just, we're going to get it done no matter what, and we'll settle up at the end of the project. What that is really, frankly, code for is we're going to lose money at the end of the project. That's what that really means. And we're operating in an industry where profits aren't fat enough to justify just rolling over and losing money at the end of the project, when there's just in certain circumstances, simply just a lack of maybe understanding or wherewithal around the contract. So in addition to providing the back office support, what Document Crunch is also doing is turning that contract into a very digestible stream of information to allow those executors of the project, those people in the field, to make well-informed and good business decisions every single day, so that they can leverage effective outcomes and not just, fall back to the traditional mentality of, we'll just kind of roll over at the end of the project and settle up then. That's what that always means. That whenever you hear a project manager say, look, it's going to all work out and we'll just get, we'll figure this out at the end of the project, that's code for we're going to roll over and we'll lose some money. And I don't believe that's a reasonable outcome, given now that there's a cost-effective way to better understand this. You don't need to go to traditional resources to understand the contract, whether you're in the back office or you're in the field. There's now tech-enabled tools like Document Crunch, frankly, that allow folks to make better decisions. And then kind of the moonshot for us, and what I think will ultimately come to pass, in fact, it's already coming to pass for us, is Imagine the day where you could start making data-informed decisions around the negotiation or around the bidding of a job. Imagine the day where you understand from a benchmarking standpoint that what you're being asked to sign or agree to by an owner or a contractor may not be reasonable, and frankly, may not be something that many of your peers in the same market would agree to. Imagine having that transparency in and around the data. Or similarly, if you're the project manager, imagine a situation where you now know that a term in your contract may, have a direct correlation to slippage in the schedule or, loss of funds. And so the data in and around these contracts are something that I'm also very focused on, to give these various personas information that they need to make better data-driven decisions over the long run. And I think that will benefit this entire industry. But going back to the whole premise of why we're here, who that really benefits is these smaller or mid-sized contractors, and kind of going back to Tom's point, that don't have these corporate overhead functions to just digest all of this stuff in a silo and spit out optimal, guidance or advice all the time. This allows these folks to essentially embed such functionality into their organizations without having to make that overhead expenditure.
That is a great way to get at what I was actually going to think about in terms of how a way of looking at what we're describing here is you're bringing in via software what a larger company might have hired. And there's really two parts to that. One of them is expertise and the ability to do something. The other one, though, is content, knowledge. So if you talked in the case of Josh, you were just talking about benchmarking and sort of a sense of what else is going on out there. And in Tom's case, it's templates and content and so on. And in Josh's case, in Jeff's case, the ability to graph and visualize things that you just, Excel can't do for you. Let's talk a little bit, Jeff, about that, about the expertise that's kind of embedded in Join.
Well, I think it's, Josh, you nailed it, because, it's about, taking all of that information and providing something they can make a decision on. Something we see in pre-construction is a lot of that information, a lot of that experience, a lot of that spidey sense is locked up in a few people's minds, right? And they might be in one region and you're working in another region, but you can really benefit from that information. We've got a ton of people aging out or going off to greener pastures, and we need them to leave that knowledge behind, and we need to democratize it, right? We need to get it out to as many people as we can. And that's what the platform in Join is about. It's about getting that information out, making it visible to everybody, but then also unlocking the expertise that we have in not only, the pre-construction teams. A lot of those folks came from the field and they've made their way into pre-construction. And we had this conversation too with a gentleman recently for one of our customers. Is there was this barrier from coming to the field to coming to the office in pre-construction and really help teams set up from the beginning. And it was, you had to be an Excel wizard, right? You just had to make Excel dance. And that is a very different skill set than understanding how project costs change, how materials costs change, and how constructability is. Well, these field project managers are great at that, but they don't necessarily make Excel dance on its head. Well, take something like Join and put that there. It's an easy to use platform that really makes that process seamless for them. And then they can really apply their expertise, apply their knowledge, and drive and change project outcomes without having to worry about, did I get this right? Or didn't I get that formula right? Or am I understanding this Excel spreadsheet? Am I going to the right tabs? Are my circular calculations right? Like that's all great if you're good at that. But if you're not, you need confidence to, bring that information to the project and really drive a better outcome. I mean, Josh, some of the things that you're talking about, Tom, some of the things you're talking about is these mid contractors are also focusing in, right? We want you to be able to analyze that data, analyze those projects. What projects are you really good at? What projects are you the most profitable? And where do you have the highest success rates? I think when you add all of these things together, you have an ability to do something that none of the other large contractors really have, right? It's the old David and Goliath. David didn't beat Goliath because he played with the same set of rules that Goliath was. He played a completely different game. And that's what technology is bringing to this. That's what these platforms and others, we're not the only ones. We're not here to say that we're the only 3 platforms that do this. There's far more platforms out there that are going to help you do this. So change the rules, fight differently, and you're going to win more, but also win the right ones. why don't you win the jobs that are most profitable, not just the low hanging fruit or whatever you can find, the scraps. Win the big ones that make your company level up. And most of the large companies can't spend that kind of time. They need the volume. You might not need that volume, but you should be focusing on where you're going to get the most value and the most profit and have the best experience. Pick great owners. Don't just pick any owner. Like, you don't have to do that anymore. We get to change this. And I got on my soapbox, but that's what I think this technology does for all of us.
Hey, if I can just weigh in on something you said there, Jeff, certainly there's the very tangible benefit of Join and Document Crunch, Project Mark making mid-sized contractors, smarter or adding functionality. But Jeff hit on something which I think is really cool. This idea of confidence. I think that at the end of the day, the confidence, which is the byproduct of having that increased functionality or being a little smarter, to just put it more directly around these issues, that energy is powerful. Whether you're Tom hit on it earlier, whether you're trying to win the job, to Jeff's point, whether you need to inspire confidence in that pre-con meeting and you're talking about pricing and different options, or in my case, whether you're the project manager who's simply putting their hand out and saying, Mr. or Mrs. owner or contractor, you owe me for this because the contract says so. That confidence is powerful. And I do believe that probably, it would be a fascinating study, but that projection of confidence, we all kind of know this intuitively, is probably the difference between winning and losing a lot of these presentations in Tom's case, these pre-con meetings in Jeff's case, or in my case, these owner meetings or contractor change meetings or negotiations. That confidence is powerful, and that's the byproduct of some of what we're talking about as well. So, to Jeff's point, if you know and you're inspired by the fact that you're changing the rules and you're educating yourself and you're getting better at this stuff, there's going to be that intangible benefit where you'll probably ultimately win more outcomes than you would have if you just kind of left it to chance or left it to reacting to inputs from these various persons that you're working with.
It's funny.
Tom, I want to ask.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to hop in on the two guys there. It's funny you ended in being reactive, Josh. It's what you guys are doing it's proactive planning, right? How many times do you hear budgets going 30-40% over budget within a year? We as a quantity surveyor for 10 years, I've been brought in because budgets were just, after DDs or construction documents, they're a completely different number than they were at concept. So from a communication standpoint, I love what you guys are doing at Join. And then Josh, how many times have you been in a situation, or I've been in a situation where contractors have missed something in the contract, or I've actually represented an owner a contract term to negotiate change orders and things like that. These are big decisions that if they put more emphasis on it on the earlier stages, like you said, they're taking home more money at the end of the job. But yeah, that was just my 2 cents, Hugh, before you.
That's all right. Well, we're going to stick with you for a second. Because Jeff, of course, had a great turn of phrase. And I'm thinking of it as kind of embedded Spidey sense. So let's talk about how that works with Project Mark. So think about what are people outsourcing with your product? Like what capabilities and skills do they not have to hire now?
Well, it's funny you say that. One of our recent companies that onboarded had an external consultant that used to help them put together RFPs on a weekly basis, and now it's their project engineer that's putting it together in a couple of minutes. It's all about the centralization of your data. If you think about time and time again, after coffee meets games of golf or a formal RFP, it's often a scramble between a lot of people and updating resumes and bringing project experience together and getting it out the door. A lot of effort is put in that in showing why you're qualified. So, that's essentially what we're saving is a lot of time in putting together the collateral, because the collateral is now up to date. It's in one place and it's acting as a construction focused CMS for lots of other things that we've built in, like the web plugin, the reports feature, and obviously what your content is now doing online. It's becoming more visible.
I got a question for you, Tom. I want you to keep going because I've had some experience with Project Mark, and one of the things I thought was interesting was the problem you're solving too for owners going into new markets,
Yeah.
right? And going into new places. And we know that construction means and methods are changing, right? And their capabilities are changing. And there's certain ones that have, well, a stranglehold on
Yep.
parts of the industry. And I mean, I think to me that was interesting because you're also providing a service there that you experienced as an owner's rep.
Guys, myself and Noel, my co-founder, we were on the same project together in San Francisco. We had the owner constantly ask questions on who was qualified in the area. We literally went to 10, I'd say 5 different buildings looking at stone to see who the stone vendors were in the city. If you think about the high-rise development that we were involved in, if I look across the street and I see Salesforce Tower, or if I see 181 Fremont, another high-end luxury condo building, you know, how do we know the vendors that have been involved in that project? It's on their websites. It's one of the first projects that they want to promote from an experience level. You know, time and time again, I've been to 3 different cities in my construction career. I've often felt like I needed to start again in terms of, you know, knowledge base in the industry, because we source companies based on their product. It's like, you know, searching for a sushi restaurant and you're finding a list of restaurants based on the product that they're proud of. That's essentially what we're doing from a construction standpoint. We're putting the product first. That allows companies, owners, reps, but also future talent to understand, you know, who's actually out there in the industry and what work they're doing.
Love that. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, our favorite topic in construction is risk. And it's the obvious place to start is with Josh, and I'm going to start with Josh. But when you think about, you know, lots of things hinge on how you manage or present your ability to manage risk. Let's talk a little bit about how you see Document Crunch helping companies that maybe don't have the same level of in-house legal that some of the larger competitors might.
Absolutely. And again, it kind of just goes back to this premise that I mentioned when on the intro here, Hugh. Construction's dynamic and stuff is going to happen. Very rarely does a project get built exactly in line with the marketing collateral that maybe Tom, you know, was involved in putting together or you know, responding to, and that Jeff's group then prices and puts together. It just doesn't happen, because we all know there's just external circumstances. There's natural things that arise, which either, you know, cause some change, I'll just say, to the price or the schedule. Who bears that risk and who's responsible for that is all governed by the contract, period. Right? So stuff is going to happen. Who ultimately, you know, has to fund that stuff is all governed by the contract. So when you think about it that way and you go into a project knowing that things are going to happen, you better outline, or you better have a framework which kind of makes sense and properly balances the risks and rewards, you know, in consideration of those various things that may or may not happen at a project. And so when you think about how Document Crunch can help, you know, before Document Crunch, and this was the problem that I foresaw, you had these small to mid-cap contractors that had one of 2 choices with every project that they were going to bid. They could either go to an external consultant and pay a ton of money to help put eyes on the risks that potentially arose in that contract for a project that they may or may not win, right? In this case, you know, you're bidding a job, you could be 1 of 3, 1 of 5, whatever it is. Or they could kind of just do what, you know, I think a lot of contractors do. And it's this mentality of being executors, right? You just give it hell and you get it done. So they rely on, you know, their own folks. You know, oftentimes what I've observed was that those folks were really not that qualified to help make decisions as to what risks may or may not exist in the contract. So that was the dynamic, right? Go and spend a lot of money, or just let's use the people that we have. And even if the people that you have were qualified in a hot market, there's a lot of bid activity, a lot going on. It's hard to, you know, necessarily dig into every single piece of paper that comes across the company's desk. So we presented a third, a better option, and that's Document Crunch, which can be used now to very quickly understand and gain insights as to what's in the contract, right? So it's, you know, it's used machine learning to outline and identify all those critical issues that are in the contract, and then explain to the end user why those issues are important, compare those issues to some industry standard, to some tips and tricks, to potentially even, it can be customized for that organization's own preferences or playbook or whatever. So imagine a scenario where a project manager now is using Document Crunch and they have their cheat sheet, which says, click here if you encounter hazardous materials. And then they click here and they see what the contract says to hazardous materials. And then there's the little note that says, you must call this person at this number if the clause that you just reviewed says that we are not responsible for hazardous materials. And you start to think about now connecting all of those dots, right? Understanding what the term was, providing immediate insight into the term, providing context or maybe some directives around those terms, or kind of using another scenario, right? A contractor is asking a sub to sign a contract, and the sub runs this through Document Crunch. And Document Crunch uncovers that there's not a waiver of consequential damages in the subcontract. And then the subcontractor may, click through and understand that opens them up to the following types of liabilities. And they all of a sudden may scratch their head and say, well, that wasn't really what I wanted to open myself up to if the project was late or if something goes wrong. And then they can maybe click through again and say, okay, well, here's a standard consensus docs waiver of consequential damages. So they can then go to that contractor and say, Mr. or Mrs. Contractor, you didn't have a waiver of consequential damages in the contract. I realize that now, running it through this analysis. Here's some pretty industry standard language on this point. Oh, by the way, this looks pretty similar because I ran your prime contract through Document Crunch. This looks pretty similar to what you got in the prime contract with the owner. Why aren't you giving me this? Why am I on the hook for this? That's the type of wherewithal that you can create, whether you're in the back office or the field.
Love that. And Tom, I was going to ask you, I think that where you help with risk is almost the other way around, right? Is you're giving owners and the folks that are actually hiring a contractor a sense that they're not taking a risk by working with a company, right? Is you're assuring them that this company is professional and is world class. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. We're in the era of judgmental tech platforms. There's tech platforms that have made a lot of money based on curiosity and who's who. We allow owners to really dig into the substance behind that company. Exactly like you said, Hugh. There's no excuse to show the projects that you've done in this day and age, or there's no excuse to have an interactive or really nice looking resume of your team experience. Some of our early investors are actually on an owner's level because they love the quickness of being able to review this information and make decisions on the spot. So yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. What we allow is an infrastructure that makes it easy to show why you're qualified. And if it's easy, why wouldn't you take that opportunity to really put yourself forward and on the other side of the table? And if you think about, I've been in that side of the table where you're seeing two proposals, one, a highly quality proposal of the team and project experience, the same one that looks like it's done on the back of an envelope with the same number. Who do you believe in, or who do you believe who's a more reputable contractor? Who do you think is going to be more streamlined with RFIs, submittals, closeouts, things like that? You automatically think it's the person with everything together. So that's what we're providing, a really easy infrastructure to make that happen.
Love it. And Jeff, of course, now I'm going to ask you the same question: is how do you guys help teams, manage, think about, and be aware of the risk as they're kicking off a project?
Well, you guys hit it, kind of all of it. And the earliest phases in construction to set us up for success is pre-construction, and in that, that pursuit process that Tom's doing. And, Tom's talking about communicating, their abilities, their capabilities. And Josh is talking about accountability, communication, collaboration, and transparency, along with accountability, which people don't like to talk about accountability in this business, but it's true. You need to be accountable. That creates trust. And if the project team trusts one another throughout the process, all the things that we're talking about doing are going to get far better. And, Josh hit on it, that things go off the rails. They don't just go off the rails because there's something wrong with us. These are 5-7 year long projects at times, multi-phase, multi-building, multi-structure. How the heck is anybody going to keep all of that straight over a period of time? Well, that's where platforms come in to inform those decisions. So the Join platform is here. We just had this discussion that an owner asked one of our contractors about, hey, how are you going to manage all of this over 5 to 7 years? So we're all clear on how these scopes have changed, how things have become where they are. It's the story behind how did we get here? So if we know how we got here, and things like document crunch can inform the different things that come up, like, hey, this is going to happen. It's going to rain over 5 to 7 years. It's going to snow. Somebody's going to have a logistical issue. How do we handle that? Well, if we've set ourselves up from the beginning with Tom's ability to choose those right contractors that we have trust with, then we're going to make good decisions that we're not just, hey, we'll figure this out and we'll lose at the end. How about we figure this out? We all actually win at the end, or when we do lose, every once in a while, we do something that we've got to lose on. Like, that's just kind of life of this business, but it should be fair. And we should trust that throughout this project, that's how these teams are going to work together. We've got silos across the board, from owners all the way down to suppliers. How do we communicate them? How do we connect all of them? And how do we create that? It's through collaboration, transparency, and accountability, right? And holding each other to task for what we say we're going to do and doing it, but also having visibility over, hey, when something goes sideways, let's say we're dealing with material and supply chain issues right now. There's not a single person in this business that hasn't been looking down the road to a project later this year going, what is lumber going to do? Am I going to be able to get this, that, or the other thing on the job? And if I can't, how the heck am I going to react to this thing? Do we want to necessarily use the contract to draw swords, or do we want to use the contract to provide opportunities that we can provide back to a platform like Join to make a good decision that benefits all of us? You know, if we all shave a small point off of what we're making, we all still make money and we help one another. This is just how this industry has to change. And it's going to change through finding the right contractors, finding the right people in that silo through things like Project Mark, managing those planning and that transparency and that those years through Join, but then holding each other accountable with things like document crunch and other things that allow us to do this. Again, we're not the only things out there that do it, but it's certainly at the core of all of our DNA. And man, I just want to say, I want to change the experience in construction, right? We deserve it as an industry. We are the built environment. There's nobody else that's going to have as much of an impact over this world over the next, as long as you can think, than us, right? In the contracting business, in the built environment. We deserve to experience that better than we have in the years past. And technology and platforms like this are here to provide a different service that can help that experience.
Hey, Jeff, about that notion of fairness, I think that's so important. You think about the culture that we've had in our industry for as long as we've all been involved, which is kind of, you shove it down the other party's throat, and things tend to always roll downhill. And then I think about, who this audience is, these small to mid-sized contractors. Candidly, they haven't necessarily gotten the most fair shake in the industry over the last period of time. And, this whole punching above your weight, what it really is about, and I know some folks have already used the term, it is about leveling it up. It is about, creating a more fair playing field. And I think, just to piggyback on what Jeff's saying, I mean, kind of one of, our ethos at Document Crunch is, if there's a more equitable framework in place, if this small to mid-tier contractors have the ability to understand and make good decisions, ultimately there will probably be some long-term benefits for the whole industry in things like, more collaborative schedules and pricing efforts, less litigation and less infighting. Ultimately, could that do things like drive down the price of construction? Could that do things like decrease the time for delivery of projects? Those are the types of things that I hope and aspire to. But I do think it starts, to Jeff's point, with this notion that we have to have a more equitable framework that goes, for all parties involved in the process: designers, owners, contractors, subcontractors. The more collaborative and more equitable, I believe, the better the long-term yields that this industry will have.
Trust is more efficient than backbiting. I mean, it's it might make sense to try to cheat someone in the short run, but in the long run, you certainly lose as an industry and even as a small ecosystem, right? So I'd like to end with a little discussion about how folks can do business with you. So where should they go learn more? We'll go round robin with this one because it's going to be a little different for each of you. But let's start with Tom. How do people get to know you better?
Yeah, just log on to, or not log on to, check out projectmark.com, and just hit that request a demo button, and you'll get pinged to our team, and you'll get a call soon after that. It typically takes about 20 minutes to run through the whole platform, and people have been blown away by what we've been able to build so far. So we're super excited, and yeah, just give us a shout.
Josh will ask the same thing.
Yeah, sure. Not too much. Yeah, documentcrunch.com is a great place to reach us. We're also fairly active on social media, so LinkedIn is our preferred kind of area where we're out there. But kind of like Tom, I think that intuitively maybe this takes 2 minutes. You upload a contract, we show you all the provisions that matter, we explain why they're important, and then we can talk about how it can be customized for you. So we're happy to help anybody who can, and thanks for having us, Hugh.
Fantastic. And Jeff, let's round it out with you.
Yeah, round it out pretty easy. Go to join.build. If you want to connect with me, it's jeff@join.build. And we're like Josh, we're pretty active on social media, et cetera, LinkedIn being the preferred place. But what I want to say is, if you want to get involved, talk and connect with this group of people that's talking and others, this conversation's far bigger. And it's just been exciting for me to be a part of kicking it off and getting it going. Yeah, we want you to come out and learn more. If you're in our space, come learn more about Join, come find out, click, get a demo. But more importantly, get involved, find things, come to us. If we're not your right solutions, we'll help point you to those right solutions. This is a rising tide lifts all ships for all of us. And Hugh, your platform's been so awesome. It's been really fun to watch all of this, get to have new voices in the industry that are giving us a platform. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and to record this episode. And thanks.
Thank you all. It's been an honor having you.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks,
See you later,
Hugh.
gents. All the best.